So Guatemala City, I think it's a really, really big, sprawling city, really huge. In one of my areas, you could stand up on the hill and you could see it, and it would just spread out forever. I think it's divided into maybe 22 or 23 zones, which the zones are usually a decent sized zone, and they're usually pretty big. You can usually, inside the city, in the capital, you can usually get most fast foods that you can get here. General luxuries, there's a thing called Price Mart, which is kind of like Costco, which there's like a couple, so if you're in the city and you're close, you can have access to that. There's a few Walmarts if you're close in the city. It changes as you go farther out. In my last area, we didn't have like anything, not even a grocery store. It was really far out, and there was just not those luxuries. Really cool places in Guatemala to see. There's lots of cool ruins. Lake Atitlan's really cool. These aren't necessarily places you can go during the mission, because the South Mission doesn't cover a lot of these, but they're cool places that you'll hear people talk a lot about in Guatemala. A place that's pretty close that a lot of missionaries always want to go to, but it's outside the mission, so you can't go, is Antigua, which is like the old city, which is the original capital. And I'm pretty sure the story is that it once flooded or something, or there was some motive for them to move the capital to where it is now. But it's like a famous old colonial town that a lot of tourists visit, and a lot of people will go to visit. So it's always like, they're like, oh, let's go to Antigua. Like the joke of, let's leave the mission and go there, even though people don't do that. Most of their houses are made of cinder block, because you don't really need heating or anything, so they build with cinder block and cement and rebar. Some of them are bigger, nicer homes, and then there's always really poor areas. The really poor houses will not have any lights, they'll have dirt floor, and they'll be made of like this corrugated lamina, like metal, or like sheet metal, you could say, just kind of wired or stapled together. That's the really poor housing. A lot of people, pretty much everyone has a pila in their house, which is a sink. So there's a central part where the water, you can turn on the water and it stores up the water. Because almost in all places in Guatemala, there's not water like all during the day. So they have to have a big reservoir to be able to store it in. And that's where they wash their clothes by hand, or they wash their dishes by hand as well. Pretty much walking down the street, there's little tiendas, little stores everywhere to buy whatever you need, a drink, or buy something to make dinner with, or anything. The food's generally, or the stuff you buy there's generally pretty cheap. And you'll legitimately, everywhere you go, you'll see them everywhere. I remember we went on a hike and we climbed to the top of a cool volcano that had like a little lake at the top, and there was a little tienda going up to the top. They're everywhere because people can just like open up their door in their house and use the bottom level as a store, or whatever they need. Something really important is that most people don't have a car. If you have a little bit more, if you have money, you'll have a car. If you have kind of a little bit more money, you'll have a motorcycle. And a funny thing is that since they only have one motorcycle for their family, they'll fit their entire family on their motorcycle. I remember we taught a couple that it was them two, and the guy was really big. He was this big welder, big burly guy. And then they had two little kids as well. The guy would be on the front, and then he'd have a little kid in front, and then there'd be his other kid like kind of Oreoed between him and his wife. And then he even welded like this extension seat off the back of his motorcycle so they could all fit a little bit more comfortably. But that's something common to see, is like people turning motorcycles into minivans and taking their whole family on them. And then most people ride the bus. In the capital, there's these red buses, which are a little more dangerous. They go slower and there's more stops. But just depending on what area you're going through, you need to be careful because there's often lots of crime on the buses. Going outside the capital, there's buses that'll go faster since they're taking like longer trips and they won't stop as often. I remember, and there's kind of just stops anywhere. There's not like set stops that the buses take. So you kind of just stand on the street and you like wave your hand and they'll stop. Usually, sometimes they don't stop or they don't see you. So I remember one time we were coming back from the office and we were going back to my area, and the bus passed, and I looked at my watch and I was like, oh, that might be the last bus. And we were like more than an hour walking distance from the house, and we had to walk a couple times already, and it was not fun. So I remember I looked at my companion and I'm like, we're going. And then we had to like get across 3 lanes of traffic to the median and then 3 more lanes of traffic because it was going the other way. And so we ran, and like when we could, we crossed through halfway, and then we kept running, and then we crossed the other way, and there was kind of some traffic. We ended up running like probably like 10 blocks. We were so sweaty because the bus did not see us to be able to stop. And then on the buses in the capital, there's like the front entrance and the back entrance, and you kind of can just hop on or get off whenever. And so I remember I sprinted, and I barely jumped, and I got on the back entrance, and then I like yelled at the bus driver to stop so my companion could get on as well. But that's like typical, is that lots of people go in buses everywhere, especially as missionaries there, since we don't have cars.